conference. Morning, fantastic that we've got lots and lots of different members and people attending conference at this event, this Stronger Together event. I think the fifth one at conference, and I'm really grateful in particular for the support of both SERA and Labour Business as well, and all of the work with us in Labour to make sure that the Stronger Together process is successful and that we can host these kinds of events. Of course, this event on how we can ensure better jobs, and it's pretty obvious where lines I think lie here. We've been very clear within the Stronger Together reports that we need an economy that actually works for working people, where the working people who create our country's wealth get a fair share of that wealth, where working people can get well-paid jobs, no matter where they live, a country where people are treated with dignity and with respect, a work with power and agency over their own lives, including their working lives, a country that rewards a proper day's work with a proper day's pay and where people can have pride in a job well done. But also a country, of course, where we can seize the opportunities of the future, where we provide a platform for good businesses to thrive and trade unions to support working people as well, with well-paid, secure work, stimulating demand and further investment, closing jobs in local economies across the country. And we believe that we can deliver that stronger future for work. People have the chance to look at the Stronger Together Britain 20 report to see that with Labour support we can deliver a new deal for working people, back British businesses to create jobs of the future, create a vocational education system, give workers rights from day one, and make flexible working a possibility for everyone. And that's such a contrast with the situation where we're rising inequality under the Conservative, rising insecure, missed opportunities to be supporting the green and digital jobs of the future, inadequate apprenticeships and training opportunities, and a growing skills gap. So I couldn't really have a better panel with me to be talking about these issues and about how we can change things for the better under Labour. I will just mention that we'll be finishing this event at 5:02. So we've got enough time for fantastic contributions from everybody here and hopefully for a really good discussion with all of you as well. So I'm just going to introduce our different speakers in completely random order. So we're just going to shuffle with everyone. Starting off with my colleague Jonathan Reynolds. Many of you will know Jonathan is the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. He used to be in the Shadow Treasury team with me previously as well. He actually began working with the Labour Party back in 2003 when he was selected to represent young members on the National Executive Committee.
Going back far.
I'm sure you can all believe. And he was a local councillor on the Tameside Council before he became elected as a Co-op and Labour MP for Stalybridge and Hyde in 2010. I'm really pleased that he's with us and in your better jobs and better work, John. Thank you.
Lovely. Institutions, but especially in work poverty, that has been such a feature of this country for the last decade. I suggest I think the fact that 1 in 8 just goes through almost every area of policy, but I think getting consistency and coordination across all of those fields is absolutely the essential thing. What we tried to do over the summer with the New Deal for Working People campaign is take our message around things like the Councillor Cook campaign and link that into a message about how the labour market in this country creates far too much work, which is insecure. And so if we want to tackle that, obviously that is a proper social security system for those who are in a position to need it. And I think the two things go absolutely hand in hand. I think the government universal credit cut as a choice between getting people back into work or maintaining the level of universal credit as it is. Clearly, if you want to reduce better wages, and what I really liked, Anneliese, about the Stronger Together events that we did together was really the chance to focus on the future. And I think what we've seen through the pandemic, if you think about what the last 18 months has meant, effectively in this country, a completely different social security system was introduced at breakneck speed. So after a decade where the Tories had frankly pushed things to the brink of collapse, what we had on the brink of the pandemic was something that simply wouldn't have coped. So obviously the government then introduces not just a higher rate of universal credit, but you see sanctions suspended, you see the minimum income floor suspended, which governs how self-employed people receive their income. You see local housing allowance increased, not generously, but increased to frankly where it should be. Would not learn from that experience, and keeping the best of how we have responded to the crisis should be a theme I think across everything that we are doing, because there will always be shocks in the future. How we are prepared for those is absolutely the issue. And I see what the government is doing as frankly the absolute opposite. So you've got that cut to universal credit as the most obvious example, but you've also got local housing allowance frozen again. And I think our message has to be that obviously that's the wrong choice for the families and the people affected, but it is genuinely a wrong choice for the country. And that's why when I talk about where we need to go next in terms of my brief, it is why we have that pledge to replace universal credit entirely. And I think there is the chance to replace it with something that commands public support, which people recognise as a genuine system that will work for them and their family. It isn't based on those punitive sanctions and conditionality, which I think too much of the present system is. And crucially, we said as part of that has to be a system where people who are in low-paid work keep more of the money they earn. Alongside that, and for better word, we still have to think about how the existing national insurance-based benefits link into the means testing part of the system, which is universal credit as it stands, because that has been sorely neglected in recent years. I think furlough shows you that you do need more than just a means tested safety net. But it is a complicated area, it's quite an expensive area in terms of policy, but it's got to be part of the conversation. Alongside that, it's very important when we're talking about better jobs and better work that we are making sure that it's an inclusive conversation about everyone. A lot of disabled people have told me that during the pandemic, when everyone was working from home, not everyone, but certain companies and sectors, they're doing that for the first time. They felt they could participate in that. But also programs like Access to Work. So we are really giving people what they need. And I think that is entirely consistent. Again, I said this yesterday in the podium, with making it clear that we'll always make sure we support those who can't work and make sure they have dignity and respect and decent standard of living that they deserve. Finally, Anneliese, I just want to say, I think the case for this reinvigorated welfare state is not only right, I think it can and is popular. In the 11 years that I've been an MP and you and I working together in the Shadow Treasury team, there are, to be absolutely frank, at times when I thought, especially when George Osborne was there, we sort of curled up into a ball and tried. That round. I hope members reckon, because we've taken the fight to the Tories on things like universal credit and on really to extend the uplift to legacy benefits, and we're absolutely right to do that. Now it's us running attack ads against them and their constituencies and putting pressure on Tories in Parliament. So I think that's because security in the workplace, real security, is a fundamental right for everyone. And if we can offer it and the Tories can't, for me that is the embodiment of what we're trying to do here with the themes. It's right.
So much for us to chew on. I'm really, really pleased that following on from you now we have Hazel Nolan. She's acting Regional Secretary for GMB Northern, and Hazel was the organiser for BIFAB. Many people here, I'm sure, will know of that case. I think one that really exposed the issues with a lack of a strong industrial policy, lack of strong procurement policy in Scotland and indeed across the UK. So an enormous job that Hazel did there as the organiser for that campaign. And we're really, really lucky to have you with us this morning and look forward to your comments, Hazel.
Thank you very much. So first of all, in the previous life, I actually used to work for an organisation called Coconut Heat, and they do amazing work in challenging the far right and the rhetoric around immigration. And I was really proud to work for them. And it really taught me an important lesson, and that is, people's jobs are their identity. And when we look at areas where we've had, where manufacturing has basically been removed, gone offshore, communities haven't just lost jobs and livelihoods, they've lost their sense of identity and their sense of purpose. And I don't think that we've given that enough consideration. I'm going to talk a little bit about BIFAB and the lessons we can have from that. So, just over 10 years ago, I learned that Scotland was going to be the Saudi Arabia of the renewables industry, which is a similar remark that Boris Johnson made this time last year. And what we found out in our lived experience, the lived experience of our members, is that actually Saudi Arabia is the Saudi Arabia of the renewables industry, as is the UAE and China, anywhere but the UK. And I think we talk a lot about stats and figures, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the human stories behind what this means. So I've always tried to project the voice of our members in any campaign that we do run. And when we were occupying the yards in BIFAB yards should never have to be occupied. This is a fabrication yard. It did really well during the oil and gas industry boom. Of course, oil and gas from offshore was sort of 150,000 jobs, directly and indirectly for the supply chains there. We were predicted to have similar numbers in renewables, and now we have less than 4,000. So if we want to talk about a just transition, what we have at the moment is an unjust transition. And I was asking one of our workers, what is BIFAB? Well, I'm a welder. And I've had to travel all over the UK, sometimes all over the world, trying to get work. And I'm from metal. And BIFAB being open means I get to talk to 7 or something to bed every night. Now that argument is in liquidation project that was funded by British taxpayer energy bills. At the same time, nuclear surgeons on an energy renewable conference in Bonn. So the only workplace is actually for the nation. Somewhere wrong. We ended up having another choice, which occupied those yards and demonstrated in five, which was a lot. And I said, well, in 48 hours, we managed to mobilize over 1,000 million marching million and we forced the Scottish government. Of course, I could do lecture doing this until we won. There's the pub. I read in the press that we used to this work. There were on a weekly basis, and this was staggering's that are affected. And I said, we've won, and they said, I hope you're out celebrating. And I said, too right, I'm celebrating. I sent a selfie of me in the pub with my now general secretary there. And he wrote back to me and said, one word, this is me celebrating. And he was talking to 7-year-old son to bed. And that's the gulf that we have to climb to win back the trust of these communities, because we've left them in those situations, because we haven't had proper long-term thinking, because we haven't taken unions with us, because we haven't had integrated policy. I had made a case to the head of SEC Renewables for importing wind farms. How ironic is that? We're putting on diesel-fueled tugboats and sailing halfway across the world. And he said, well, we import the steel anyway. Well, why aren't we using British steel? Where's the commitment to that? Where's the integration to that? I'm now the Northern Regional Secretary for Tees, and we've lost the revenue seats there. The number one issue that I'll tell you is that they've lost their jobs. And that is the gravity of the situation that faces us, and that's the hill we have to climb to win back the trust. Talk about good paying, decent jobs, because if you're an apprentice, and we did talk about apprentices, and it's welcome that this report looks into that, but why would you be starting off as a young person in that industry now? Why would you? The funding was in John last year to work, absolutely sure he wouldn't get a lick of paint on the yards there. And if we don't get this right now, then we are going to lose those jobs. We talk about green, renewable jobs coming to the UK. We're already 20 years behind everywhere else in the world. And I'm just laying that down as the real price. And a lot of, minimum wage was one of the biggest wins that Labour like to talk about from the last time they were in government. And now it's become an absolute ceiling for so many workers. If 1 in 8 workers really are in working poverty, then what we really need from the trade union movement is the conditions to allow us to organise. And yes, I'm excited about the challenge that we face. That's the real life experience of our members. And hopefully Labour will be able to hold their feet to the fire on that. And we can start talking about jobs and work, and decent jobs and work. But not just talking about it in terms of writing policies, and the actual realities of where we are now and what we need to do about it, and taking those communities with us.
Thanks very much indeed, Hazel. It was really important to hear that direct experience and those challenges that we've got to face up to as Labour. So thank you very much for being with us. I'm very pleased now to be passing on to Phil, who many of you may know if you've been involved with Labour business. He has been for a very long time. He's now vice chair of Labour business. He served as an elected member of Gedling Borough Council, which I didn't actually know until I saw your bio. So it's very, very interesting.
Landslide.
He's chairing the Future of Work Policy Group with Labour Business, and he's a serial entrepreneur, presently a co-founder in an AI business, artificial intelligence business, and an investor in Black Star Amplification. It sounds very interesting.
The best guitar amplifier company in the world.
Well, with that introduction, my goodness, I'm looking forward to what you've got to say on this.
Anneliese, before I move on, Jonathan and Anneliese have been doing for Labour policy all of their lives deserves a round of applause from all of us. As do the rest of us on this panel, supporting our party that we love, that I've been a member of and a proud member of for over 30 years. And before I talk about what I want to talk about, I want to say why I'm Labour. When I grew up in Nottinghamshire, Thatcher's police were beating up the fathers of my schoolmates on picket line, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I am Labour. I'm also highly qualified. I took my master's degree in politics at Sheffield, of course, the only place you can actually learn politics. And here we are discussing everything that needs to be done today. First of all, I'd like to begin by addressing some of the comments that Jonathan's made. The Labour Party has been our stroke of one. First day in office, you get 12,000 a year before you pay tax. If you're on minimum wage, you get 18,000 a year. We take a grand off. It's not just about minimum wage. Call it tax avoidance. I call it Tory policy. Tory policy has been to allow larger companies to not pay tax for a very long time, and that is why Jeff Bezos should be left in space for the rest of his career. Agree on that. Now, we actually think largely about it. What we do need is entrepreneurship taught as soon as you're 11 years old in school. 10,000 people in the world in my time and wages are very different in different economies, and that's just the political reality. But to create jobs and growth, you need resources and skills. And one of the things you do need is the right to finance. It's incredible to me that the fees to such students when they come out of university, perhaps with an entrepreneurship degree, and now they can't borrow money to start a business because they have bad credit, because they have money. Should we not be charging for education? We should be paying students a decent salary to go to university and learn the skills they need for the future to invest in our future economy. It's a radical proposal, and one I think needs to come into play. Resources are key. In Paris, if you have a look at one of the colleges there, College 42, there are no teachers, but there are resources. Every resource you need to start your entrepreneurial journey: technology, access to finance, mentorship, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're not sat doing an 18th century syllabus where you're writing down quotations from people who are dead. That's not really the way forward in British entrepreneurship. So it's extremely important that we consider the right to finance for entrepreneurs. You know, they have this in the United States. The Small Business Administration provides over 50 billion a year in finance. How do they do it? The government underwrites the private sector loans to those businesses. Only a 3% default rate, and they create tens of thousands of new jobs every year, and you don't need to put a penny of it on the public sector borrowing requirement because the market pays for it. And later, and finally, I just want to say my efforts have resulted in jobs, families being able to pay for their mortgages and their right to their future. So it's extremely important that the labour movement not just backs work in the 18th century, probably to me as a colleague, a partner, an employee, a shareholder, everybody who works with me in my health. And there are new business models that we can put together. So I just want to say, we can have a business-led recovery, we have a green economy recovery. And by the way, if anybody needs anything investing in their green economy idea, do come and see me afterwards. But I want to say this in a final word. The Labour Party cannot, at the next general election, sit around not increasing tax-free allowances for low-paid workers. You can't have a better job caring for my old grandmother in her care home. That's very, very hard work. And what you should not do is get home at night and decide between food and central heating. That is wrong, and we can solve that as a stroke by stopping transfer pricing. For those of you who don't know what it is, by the way, this is where the board of boots the chemists fly to Zurich in Switzerland once a month, sign an invoice for hundreds of millions, and suck the untaxed profits out of their company directly into their pension funds. That is tax fraud. I go to Tesco's, you see a sign that says, a free ride in a police car if you steal a Mars bar. How about this thought? Businesses should pay where they earn. They should pay their tax where they earn. That includes Amazon, who presently owe the British government at least 50 billion in unpaid taxation. Although they'll tell you, and that
very much, Phil. A lot in there to provoke discussion, I'm sure. So thank you very much indeed for being with us as well, for the business. our last speaker, Jake Sumner, who co-chair of SERA Labour's environmental campaign that's been running so successfully for many years. I see here, Jake, that you've spent 3 decades in policy and campaigns. You must have started off when you were about 83, so you're doing very, very well in that regard. Jake has served as a special advisor for the last Labour government, Shadow Business Secretary between 2010 and 2015, and he was really pivotal in the work that Liam Byrne was undertaking in the West Midlands, particularly around green manufacturing. So really looking forward to your thoughts as well, Jake. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And this, as you might expect from the content, SERA is the environment campaign. But we know that it's an imperative and a green future that we need. And it does shape every aspect of policy. I think one of the dangers that we've is that our green future, people are worried. We see perhaps the taxi driver and that systemic change can bring, and the new job opportunities and good work, and some of the things that colleagues have been saying today now. And we need to make that happen. And this has to be the green, and the future is social justice and environmental action together. And that's what the Labour movement has always been about, and it needs to take it forward ahead. And I'm going to draw on some of the work that we did. And which I sat on that and helped set that up. And that brought together councillors, it brought together businesses, it brought together trade unions and learning institutions. And we were really looking at what that future could be around green manufacturing. And I think one of the things that came through this work and how we looked at people found themselves on a sort of billboard between the anxiety for recovery and sort of thought, oh, is it a bit expensive how we move to the green economy, or how do we do it? But that sort of disappeared. Understand it, the identity point. We can capture the global capital of green tech and green manufacturing. We discussed how much that resonated, and people could see it in the future for young people. I'm moving in this direction, and Hazel mentioned some examples, and you can see real investment. And we really must, and we are sufficiently at the moment. There are big opportunities, and just to name some of them, we've got the whole retrofit that we need across housing, building the batteries for electric cars, and those electric cars we're behind on the gigafactory needed. This is the future of automotive. I'm making an announcement or two and say, but when we compare it to what Europe is doing, they're way ahead coming forward. And also building trains, the rail systems, all those sorts of things, as well as the equipment. We lost out on building turbines, and when all the wind turbines were coming on, they were being working for Labour back then as well. We were missing the opportunities. And when in the energy shift and the energy transition that's coming, in making those parts is businesses want, and they said through this work, they wanted regional level and government working with them on tackling some of the issues on the pipeline of work, seeing it, using procurement to buy green, enabling lower cost energy to support their work. aligning the skills, bringing the finance and issues that Phil just raised. There. And that can be done. And that's why, you know, Rachel Reed did in the when we lost in 2010, and in the early days of that period, we then developed that idea of a modern industrial strategy. And lots of people have been, and it was really did put that firmly in. The government adopted it, and we've seen it sort of money. It's not, it is not really underpin the move to the green economy. But, you know, I think we need to also say there's a danger that we just see the sort of green jobs, the green future in some of that, in that manufacturing, some of, literally making it. Now, let's remember that in the HR jobs, the accounting, the procurement, the sales, logistics, and all of the supply chain supporting it, they're parts of the green economy too, those further. So we should think about that and recognise that. But then let's look at other sectors too. The restaurants, some restaurants are really moving in the terms of their sustainability, where they're sourcing things, and although waste are reducing waste, they're part of the green economy. And so they've got this really wants to do the economy. And we also need to realise as well that there are other jobs. And Luke Pollard spoke at the SERA about yesterday, and he really emphasised that we're in the climate and environment. Why is there no tree planting and nature restoration programme? I mean, there's loads of young people who are unemployed in parts of the country. It's in some parts of West Midlands, it's one in 20. It's huge, and we need that to be with the training that brings loads of people, and actually that access to nature is really important for mental well-being too. So and I was speaking to some tree charities yesterday about that, and that's something that can be done and should be done. And then the final point I want to say is about trades. And we did the figures, and there's about 1 in 10 people who work in trades, the sort of white hand back. And we tend to forget about them a lot. So, do we talk about them as a party? No, not really. Does anyone really? And yet, what's their role in the green economy? Well, there could be a huge role for retrofit, a massive role for retrofit, all the work that needs to happen on changing homes. Now, sadly, there was a scheme, the Green Homes Programme, but that was poorly managed. It's now been cut, and then it's axed. And that undermined confidence. It was badly organised. So people don't have anything in place. But again, a proper at-scale programme and working locally and regionally with local authorities can make this happen. And that's a real big opportunity for those trades. And so what I wanted to just do is paint that picture of the different types of jobs that make up that future green economy. We need the plans behind that to make that happen, to really accelerate it. But it's a powerful story for the future. It's one that we can own, it's one that we should have, and it's one that we need to be telling that story wide and far across the country, because that can be our future, and that can help with the good work and the good future we want to see.
Thank you very much indeed, Jake. And can I just say to people who are diligently standing, if you want to sit down, please do sit yourselves down over here, because there's lots and lots of seats in the other half. Don't be shy, don't worry about upsetting anybody if you do want to sit down. Or feel free to hold pressure, no pressure. Okay, we've got enough time for a good discussion, I think, now. I can see that there's already one hand up at the back. I'll take these 3 people, actually. Gentlemen there, and then women in the middle, and another woman just next to the door. So I think there is, oh, thank you very much. So yes, we've got Michael. Lovely. And maybe if you can just say who you are and where you're from.
Yes, of course. It's from question.
That was a great question. Sure will be.
Yeah, so I wanted to pick up on the green manufacturing in Porsche. Government affairs. On the comprehensive spending review, when I was the statutory report to the government reporting, I wondered if we have views on how we can encourage green manufacturing and develop it properly and comprehensively and match our peers in Denmark and elsewhere.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Laura Thompson from Lucian Dexter. So I'd like to say in this very room, I'm very encouraged to, as a equivalent lawyer, to hear these two organisations, to see them sitting next to each other and speaking to each other. Rachel Reeves made quite a big announcement, had a large in context of using the needs identified by Hazel, the aims and intentions Hi, I'm Yasmin. You, SERA. I just wanted talking about trades because as builders in rice supporters and self-employed and take the Labour Party, and I also go to webinars which in what how to retrofit their homes. It's all really exciting, but it's totally wide. Builders could easily do. And we just please, and we just talk to builders and get them back what, voting for Labour Party. And can I also just say, it is very wide, so, we can say, oh yes, but this benefits the poorest people and they're often in awful polluted places. But can we please communicate this to them? And, taxi drivers, as you mentioned, shopkeepers, trades, please, can we get some structural help in for them? Because they don't have choices about, oh, I want to buy, a green car or whatever, electric. They don't have those choices. They just, work around the clock. And can I also just quickly it feels very fascinating. I know I've been an environmentalist for years, and being an environmentalist is just hard labour. It's hard graft to chop your vegetables and go to the market and get on the bus and use public transport, especially with children. And could you think about something structural for women? So I'm not just being right on here, but it's like women and people of colour. If they don't get this, or if you communicate this in a way that feels very elitist, then I can vote.
Thank you. Very good. So we've got three very meaty questions there. Maybe if I can go in reverse order for responses to the first round. It starts off with this object.
On the first round, funding and financing and things like that. I agree with what you said, but I suppose just to sort of special advice in low carbon homes standards, and that climate change has said about 1 million homes have been built, which now are retrofitting. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And I asked a question a few we're just introduced. Surely the industrial strategy means we need to invest for the long term. You can't just have these knee-jerk reactions and not, surely that was a mistake and couldn't answer it, recognise those things. And I think, this is why a green industrial strategy is so important to create that pipeline and to create all that framework. I mean, there's lots of detail that one can talk about here, so I'll stop there. But just an example of a failure to then what would have led to a green outcome, and that was blocked before. On the trade point, and interesting on this, and as I said, we tend not to talk to people in trades, and it's really important. I understand New Zealand Labour Party actually does do that, and they have like a manifesto and things. They're saying I think in Australia as well, and we did think, there must be this conversation because people can't be excluded from this, and this is also what Just Transition is about. Not just, it's about thinking about where people's jobs are in this future economy and how they might be part of it. And so, we need, there needs to be more work around this, but there is plenty of opportunities, and I think it is connected, and it's using procurement, it's using, buying stuff from, local businesses, and lots of authorities, offices and processes like that, and that can drive it, but it needs to be much more systemic, and as I said, unfortunately, the Green Home Grant, in this case, undermined the case, and I think some trades are going to think, well, what's the point of that? But, there needs to be part of it. So, anyway, other stuff.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jake. Phil?
Well, I'd just like to pick up on your point about supporting women and minorities, and actually it goes back to the fundamental issue of where now all of those people you've mentioned, many of whom, by the way, members of Labour business, are highly involved with individuals who run their own businesses, the self-employed 5 million people in this country who get up every day not knowing that they've got a salary and they depend on the work they do in forage for and find contractors. There's a great role here for Labour to essentially finance local authorities to provide the cash to deliver some of the things that Jake has been talking about. I said earlier on that the role of government is to provide money. It is to underwrite the British state. We are here to guarantee it. That's what happened in the 2008 crisis when Gordon Brown saved the world, and he did, and history will show that to be the case financially. And it is a reality that if we provide the right to finance, people can start their own businesses. It isn't dependent on whether or not we're talking one group or another. It is simply a function of the availability of finance. And I think that's when I had an idea, and I had a great mentor and some great signposting and some help finding my way forward. And that's what you do in the United States. All business is available through the Small Business Administration. It has hundreds of chapters throughout the country. And if you want to start your own business, go to that one place and say, hey, I want to start my own business. What can you do? And before you know it, there's a package of offers to help finance what you're doing. Money is a commodity. It isn't the best commodity. Ideas are the best commodity. And you've got to put both of them together. And that's how to address all the white van Tory voters down here. Give them some real value. Make it a requirement to install a Dodds scheme that actually a requirement. Place on local authorities the duty that every home in their region has to be fitted within a 10-year time frame. Otherwise, hey, you know what? Triple the council tax. If you don't allow people into your home and you don't do your part in the green economy, you're going to pay for it. Take some responsibility and get it done. Carrot and stick. That would be my answer to your point.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan.
On your point on green manufacturing, there's a few things I'd say. First of all, there are clearly in subsidising those. I think, as Jake said, consistency is crucial. different programmes I've seen announced and cancelled in a short space of time. I remember the zero carbon homes argument. I remember the investment bank being set up and prioritised before it really started to deliver. I think you can literally count how long we've been involved by how many different carbon capture and storage initiatives have started and then been cancelled. The ECO programme, which was the Green Crack Cameron, got rid of it, didn't last a calendar year, and people have geared up to supply that. And unless people believe there will be consistency in policy, they will not invest in it. I mean, you know, there are people who are very badly burned by those things. But I do think, James, there's a bigger bit than that. And this links to what you said here at the beginning, which is we can't get away from what is a very thorny political problem. We have some industries in this country that are very carbon intensive, but if you benchmark those internationally for other companies in that sector, what we have in this country internationally is quite efficient, but it's still very carbon intensive. And if working people in this country think we're going to close down those businesses and just import the same products from abroad because the way we geographically account for carbon emissions means that's one way to meet their targets, then we will lose all the political support. And I think that goes directly to your experience, Hayes, and what you were talking about. I always think what we were talking about, Anneliese and the last, let's see what carbon emissions in the country in terms of not just the UK, but what imports as well as domestic emissions, unless you get the true picture of that. I know that in many ways we're perhaps sure we haven't made the progress that a lot of governments would say we have in the run up to COP, but you know, that's Laura, you asked about the increase in spending that Rachel announced yesterday. It is a very big increase. I mean, my understanding is that's 4 times the investment currently going into this country. Let me give you a secret. If you're a shadow front bench or a lead on any front bench, you can never offend the Treasury team. So I'm not going to say anything that the Treasury team themselves might want to announce, but I think there is a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of the actions that we need to take. I mean, I think on things like retrofitting and low-carbon heating, we could have made decisions, frankly, a decade ago when I was first in Parliament. I think there was no real excuse for how slow some of that has been. That is a real source of, on some of these things, there will not be a market solution. You can work with the private sector to deliver them, but there have to be political choices. And a good example of that is on heating, for instance. So, if we're going to change for domestic heat networks, which obviously take existing heat sources and turn those into heating domestic heaters, you can try and green the existing gas network. But unless you make a choice, you'll have the fixed costs of all 3 systems, and actually the costs are prohibitive for lots of people. So it does require decision making. The crucial thing is you've got to then also be putting in the resources that make those decisions real. I think what Rachel announced yesterday was absolutely the level of ambition that's required. And finally, Yasmin, look on traders and vans and things like that. I think the question is even bigger than what you said. The problem you identified is the right one. We have struggled for quite some time so far to have a coherent offer to people who are self-employed, but frankly in previous generations they would have been directly employed. And we're absolutely right in terms of the gig economy where some people are forced into self-employment and they're not really, and the GMB is absolutely brilliant on the legal side of that to bring those cases. But there and the autonomy and independence that comes from that. And he's got a good living and a good life around that. But if we're being honest in terms of how we sometimes communicate about that, how we look at the existing welfare state and national insurance and how that works, and the support and benefits that are there, it's not configured for people who have taken that choice to have the benefits of self-employment, but are frankly working people who we should have a coherent offer to. I think it's very interesting, the self-employment support scheme in the pandemic and how that was very well received. It's an example perhaps of the kind of thing, again, it's very ambitious, it's expensive, so you've got to work out how to do it. But you're absolutely right to raise the problem. I think it requires an even bigger response on them. I think we're very much interested in that area, and that's where we're going to be going.
Thanks, John. Please. The economy is something of the scale. We can talk about they can move towards the economy, but really it's like talking about planning stuff. And to plan for that, it has to plan long term. John mentioned carbon capture storage. well, actually, if we had had a long-term plan for that, then we wouldn't have the current crisis that we have. But and that is a lack of planning. And I think sometimes, I think we need to be a bit more mature in our debate as well. Like there's constantly this argument, especially with the GED, the issue of gas. Really, gas is a transition fuel. And if we're going to get realistic about the climate change crisis, then we need to start looking at it as such, instead of just having the argument of ending it, how do we use it as a transition? And that's just talking about the reality that we face. Really, I think the Labour Party needs to. I still think the scale is just unprecedented. I just don't think we're having an honest conversation about that whatsoever. And we can talk about our carbon emissions. Really, like Labour government or whoever is the government needs to create conditions for us to be able to do our part. The reality is, I've also worked in British Gas and huge British Gas strikes recently, and those workers, they do care. They are good people. It's not just that they vote Tory and they hate everyone. They're characterised in the way that we used to. But they're not going to care if the primary thing that they can do is not putting food on their families' tables. And that's where we're losing the debate with them. And we can argue about whether or not they're right or wrong, but that's where they are, and we have to meet them there and take them with us. And we're not doing that at the moment. And this is a generation of people historically always voted Labour and they've been lost. And we have to be relevant to them. And when it comes to women, what can we do for diverse communities? If we properly invested, for example, in hydrogen, and there is great work going on with gas networks and introducing hydrogen to gas networks, and that will have a huge impact on heating and energy. We could make public transport free. That would transform the lives of loads of women who commute, and loads of our communities as well in inner cities. I used to do a London commuter many years ago, and I'll always remember that experience. But imagine if it's free, and it could be. But we're wasting the opportunity in the same way that when we talk about the wasted opportunities we have from North Sea oil and gas, and the different experience that the UK had in comparison to Norway, we're doing the exact same when it comes to renewable energy. The exact same. The UK is a world leader in offshore wind farms and a world loser in providing jobs and free for people in the UK from it. That has to be rectified. And the only people that can do that is the government, because the scale is just absolutely too big for anyone else. And then great, after that we can talk about all the conditions for green economy and green enterprise and everything else. That's fantastic. But like I said, it's like thinking about clean the ocean up by banning straws. So yeah, that's what I think needs to happen. And long-term proper investment, and that comes to our education policies need to be in sync with our policy on procurement, need to be in sync with our policy on energy. Doing a little bit, but we can have honest debate about where we are now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Hazel. Just to say around investment priorities, Labour's already set a number of those out in the Green Economic Recovery Report that we set out some months ago, and it is picking up on many of the priorities that people have been talking about. So do check that out, and also do hang around if you want to get even more into some of these subjects, because the next seminar, I suppose, did we call it that, or event that we've got taking place in this room in 5 minutes will be with Ed Miliband and a number of other speakers from Labour, getting even more into some of these issues that we've been talking about now. That does mean that unfortunately we need to stop this now. I'm sorry about that. If anybody's got any burning questions you want to ask any of the speakers, do come up to the front, but we're going to have to do a changeover, I'm afraid, for the next event. Big thanks to everybody for being here. This really important discussion, and above all, massive thanks to all of the panellists. I think we've had a really fascinating discussion this morning. Thank you.